New York. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Journeys. Welcome to another edition of CWS. The lovely lady on the other side of the screen this evening is Joy Agness. Joy, good evening and welcome to CWS Journeys.
Good evening, Selwyn, and thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. Joy is an author, professor, wedding and event planner. She's the CEO of Joy Agness Events. Their motto, the royal treatment, says it all. An upmarket event planning firm which coordinates multiple domestic and international weddings and events, event designing and management in South Florida, the Caribbean, and beyond. Our attention to detail, luxurious elements, and the wow factor has established Joy Agnes as the go-to wedding planner for brides who prefer an elegant and unique wedding. Well, I'm going to just end it there and let's talk to Joy and hear it from Joy's mouth. Joy, were you determined and driven as a child, or did it start later in life?
Oh, it started later in life. When I started out, I wanted to be, as far back as I can remember, I wanted to be a doctor, but that didn't work out, and I migrated to the U.S. and got into the nursing profession, medical field. And a friend of mine who was Jewish at the time, working at the hospital, there are always birthday parties and doctors' parties. So I like doing that. I like working with my hands, getting involved with that. So then she says to me, "You're good at this. Why don't you do it as a business?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want to do this as a business." And she says, "You'll be surprised." And 26 years later, here I am as a business. So
Well,
it's my hobby that I really turned into my.
well let me ask you this before we get into how this all gets started and so on. Beyond the accolades, the awards, and titles, what is the closest some have come to accurately describing you?
Warm, funny, intelligent, pleasant.
I like that. You were born in Guyana.
Yes, I am a Guyanese born and raised.
Give us a glimpse of life growing up in Guyana at ages 9 and then at ages 15.
Oh my goodness, growing up Guyanese was very exciting now that I look back at it. A lot of friends, your neighbors or your friends, your schoolmates, your playmates, and all of the above. I grew up in very humble beginnings because I am a product of East Peniton. My parents, Hyacinth and James Hamer, that's where we lived until I migrated, and both of my parents are now deceased. But my dad was in the United Force and then volunteer force and then, of course, national service. My mom was a stay at home person, very productive, worked a lot with her hands, did a lot for her kids. So I had this very stable environment growing up. I grew up in a very loving environment because both of my parents made sure of that. And it's something we take for granted, Selwyn, growing up until I become of age as I am right now. And I realized how privileged I was as a child to have parents of that caliber.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to look back and say thanks to my parents for making such an impact in my life, and having everybody 6 children, 4 boys, 2 girls. At that point in time, you don't realize how much these things mean to you until you progress in life and you look back at it, and then you realize, oh, well, okay, it wasn't as bad as I thought.
Mm-hmm.
At age 15, to be very honest with you, um, I attended the National School of Dance and Lavina Williams, Madam Lavina Williams at that time. So I was doing dancing, and then I did shorthand and typewriting, and then later in life, I became, sorry, I became a teacher. Right after becoming a teacher, I migrated to the US, Canada first, and then to the United States. I worked at the Guyana Consulate in Canada, and there I had a very, very good teacher at that point in time. Um, I call him my teacher, my mentor, because he exposed me so much to what I am doing today without even realizing that it would have become beneficial in my life back then. So here I am.
Here you are. Let's go back a little bit to Isla Penitence.
Hmm.
What is what are some characteristics about Isla Penitence that you remember? Certain things that would have helped to shape this woman that you've become today.
Oh my goodness. So many things. The Bentons is vast. And we had a variety of everybody you can think of, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. And we were not allowed as the Hema children to go beyond our gate at 6 o'clock in the evening. So that was one thing that shaped me growing up.
Hmm.
That, knowing that you weren't really out there like that, we were kind of sheltered. The boys were allowed to do a few extra activities, but myself and my sister, not really. So that's number one. Number two, reading was mandatory in our household. My mom was an avid reader, which I think she's passed on to all of us kids because we all love to read. And I am an avid reader. So that is what I do more or less in my spare time. I read a lot.
You mentioned your parents, and I always believe that our parents have a lot to do into molding the people we become or we are
Oh,
becoming.
yeah. Yeah.
When you think, what are your fondest memories of your parents?
Oh God, there's so many of them, so many. But I'll just my mom was an educational person.
Hmm.
She was never a teacher or anything, but there was no question that you could have asked my mother that she did not have an answer for you, and that came with the knowledge of reading. And then she'll show you and she'll back it up. And she was also a minister at that time of the gospel. So I mean, I had that to go with. My dad and I were extremely close. Not that my mother and I wasn't, but I was a daddy's girl. I could not have done anything wrong. And so I will have my dinner. This. I was saying this to a friend of mine last night. I'll have my dinner and then I'll sit there and wait for dad to come in, and then I'll have half of his dinner so we can have conversation. And I was saying, I was saying to my friend that when I became 16, my very first love was my dad. Because I don't know if you can remember Selwyn Brown Betty at that point in
Yes, I
time.
remember Brown Betty.
My dad took me to Brown Betty and we had a red rose that he gave to me and he says, I want you to remember, I'm giving you this rose because I love you. If you're going to get later in life and you're going to meet men, and if they can't measure up, you don't need to be with them. If they can't give you a rose, they can't give you anything else because you are a rose. So
If
that always stayed with me.
if
Don't
you were,
settle.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
No, I'm saying don't settle. He taught me not
don't
to
settle.
settle.
If you were to eavesdrop your parents, telling a stranger about you, how do you think each of them will describe you?
My father would say, Joanne is very forceful. She's very decisive of what she wants to do. She doesn't really waver much in her decisions. My mom would say, if you don't want her to know something, don't tell her and don't let her get a book if it's not nailed
Guy,
down.
Guyana, growing up in Guyana, here you are, this successful Guyanese woman. When you think of Guyana and being Guyanese, what comes to mind?
Home, food, friends, fun, frolic, loving all of it.
Ah, tell us about the frolicking. Were you a very playful child? Were you a bookworm or a bit
I
of
was
both?
a bookworm, playful, minimal, not a lot, because like I said, we were very structured. So
Yeah.
reading was mandatory. There wasn't a choice there. But frolicking for me was going around the corner to a friend of mine and exchange Archie comic books back.
Ah,
So that was frolicking for me because I could get out to the yard and we can stand up and we chit chat a little bit. So that was frolicking for me.
is there one particular experience about the area you grew up in, East of Penitence,
Hmm.
that you always remember, that helped to shape you in some positive experience that you always sort of refer to and was glad that you grew up there?
I am very happy that I grew up in East Penitence, and I tell you what, East Penitence back then when I was growing up was a network. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody looked out for everybody's children. Quoting Miriam Makeba, it takes a village to raise a child, and that is what we had in East Penitence. Because our neighbor was not only our neighbor, it was our caretaker, it was our friend, it was a provider. The key was left there if it needed to be. If your parents are going to be out, or the back door would be open, but it's pulled in. So things like that for me has shaped me into who I am, trusting. But in today's world, as we know, that's a word with a lot of commas behind it. Question marks, question marks, question marks, question marks.
When you first left Guyana, how old were you?
20.
20.
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like? Or let me rephrase the question. What was the first country you went to? Canada?
That is correct.
Okay. So here you are in Canada. When you look at the two different cultures, what stood out to you in terms of their differences?
Um, Canada was very impactful for me because it was extremely notwithstanding that Guyana was not clean. Let me make that quite clear before people misconstrue what I'm saying. But getting into Canada, it has this pristine look when you enter it, and the lights and the layout of the entire country and everything else. And coming out of Guyana, not saying my country is or was dark, but it's a totally different environment that you have just stepped into.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows you to think and broaden your perspective mentally. And this is the place I want to be, and this is the place I want to work, and this is the place I want to do and do and do and do and do. And that is where I was at that point in time in my life until I went to the Ghana consulate. And like I said, I had a very good teacher who was Vic Prasad. And he was the protocol officer at that time. So like I said to you before, I learned a lot about him where protocol was concerned, which infused what I'm doing right now. So I'm happy about that.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that. What you're doing right now, wedding and event planning and all these wonderful things. How were you? When were you first introduced to events and wedding planning, and who introduced you, and how did it resonate with you at the time?
Like I said prior, I started doing events. I started with well, not weddings really, but I started with events
Uh-huh.
because being a nurse, I worked at Doctors Hospital of Hollywood in South Florida, and I worked in the emergency room. So there was always a birthday party or an anniversary or something. So we would all get together and make a few things happen. And then my girlfriend at that time, who was Jewish, she's now deceased, she says to me, I think you should turn this into a business. And I'm like, no, I don't want to turn this into a business. I don't know how it's going to go, but I love doing it. And she says, no, I really think you should. Well, her dad was approaching his 50s, and for some reason or however, she talked him into having a birthday party that I had the pleasure of doing. And so, when I have to tell you, I got into the black and white scene of having a black and white sit down dinner, and I'm going through this whole thing. And that resonated, and that's where I got my actual first paycheck. I got $400 for doing that 50th birthday party.
What was that like for you? Working, doing a business and getting paid for it. How did that feel?
Exciting.
Mhm.
It's a lot of work. Nothing comes easy, as we know. But just to see the expression of appreciation in everyone's faces as they come in,
Yeah.
and even guest of honor, because I never met the man prior to that evening. I spoke with him on the phone, but his daughter was our liaison between the two of us. And when he came in and he looked at it, he says, this is really nice. I like this. I think you should really do this. And that's where it grew from there.
And then the wedding planning. When
Well,
did that?
wedding planning came in a little later, about, I want to say 2 years later. My very first wedding that I did small weddings, but the very first major wedding that I did, it was for my niece who now lives in London. And that was held at the Raintree Golf and Country Club. And that was a spectacular event, really was.
Mhm.
That event I will forever be proud of because not only being the aunt of the bride, but also being the wedding planner of the bride. And also at that time, without even knowing it, I was the destination point to come to because this is South Florida. So she flew from London to South Florida to have her wedding. It's amazing how life sets you up sometimes.
Yeah.
The thing you're not totally aware of until later. Because at that point in time, there was no destination wedding specialist and no destination wedding to be had. We never even called them that. You just say, well, I'm going to Guyana to get married or Trinidad or, South Florida or wherever. So that was something that grew out of that. And I have to say thanks again to my friend Preston Bailey for bringing in wedding and event planning on an international scale. So when Preston hit the scene and started doing weddings and started doing them internationally and having destinations, it caught on. So yes, I'm happy to be a destination wedding specialist.
That first wedding, what was what were some of the challenges you had in the beginning?
Oh
And
my goodness. Pulling everything together. The bride is not in front of you, trying to make sure that you're well coordinated with everybody involved. Because you want, when everybody touched down on the ground, things are as way they were planned to be. And you have to make sure that it's executed. You cannot promise people things that you're not going to deliver, especially when you have, their money in your hand. And I believe in giving people what they pay for because I expect to get what I pay for.
you're this wedding planner. Tell us, make a case for hiring a wedding planner, Joy.
I think every bride, that's the second thing she should think of after she's engaged, and I'm very serious. It's pointless trying, some people again will disagree with me. It's pointless planning a wedding for yourself. It's suicidal. And I'll tell you why I say it's suicidal. The day of, you're going to show up there hot and bothered. You're not finished what you're doing because you still have to get dressed, and everybody's calling you for whatever reason, and you're totally out of yourself. It's all well and good you want to prove to your friends and your family, I can do my wedding and still decorate and still bake the cake and still whatever. But in all actuality, all you're doing is burning yourself out. So whatever your budget is, find somebody that could, actually work with you to help you to be able to execute whatever your dream is. And there are a lot of people out there that will work with the bride or work with the groom to make it happen.
You know, I'm always curious about the wedding planners and the bride and the groom, and the two different families agreeing and things. How do you manage that when one side wants a particular thing, the other side wants a particular thing? How do you manage that?
It's called compromise. You have to be able to compromise. Some in laws are very dominant that even the couples don't get a chance to choose what they would like to have, especially if grandpa is paying for it. Well, then, if it's my father is paying for it, I think we should have first dibs of what should happen. And if my mother is paying for it, I think we should be able to have the final say. Now, in a situation like that, you try your actual best to sit down and communicate with both sides of the bargaining table and to let them know, look, it's not about you. It's not in a very rude way either. It's not about you. It's about this couple that's getting married. I think we should ask them what they would like to see. I think you should ask them what they would like infused in their wedding. And I'm sure we can come up with a compromise and meet each other in the middle.
The challenging experiences, right? The
Mhm.
um, and forgive me if I'm being overindulgent here, but I would just like you to tell us an experience that you had that really test your metal, really challenge your experience, and really challenge your
On what level, Sarah? Is it financially? Is it venue wise? Is it the florals? What part of it I would
Oh
want?
my gosh. Well, tell us of an experience when you let's talk venue. Let's talk venue. Um,
You have to be careful
uh-huh.
because a lot of times people see things when they're dressed up. They don't see them when they're naked, and which is what a lot of times throw things out of compliance with brides and grooms. They look at a picture in a magazine, and this is where I want to get married. This is where I want my wedding to happen. Okay, fine. You show up, and there's a few things out of place, and so now they're panicking. Oh, but it didn't look like this in the magazine. Well, this is reality. So what do? We can recreate what you saw, not identical what you were looking at, but we can create something. Now, which it has to be infused with pipe and drape and florals and all of the above, and the lighting and visual audio, all these things have to be infused there. Now, when all that is done, then there is a transformation of how it's going to look. So you have to walk them through this entire process because you are going to be the person executing it. So you have to now give them the idea of what it's going to look like. Because one thing that you have to bear in mind, when a bride and a groom comes to you, they are coming most of the time without knowledge. They are depending on your expertise to make it happen. So you now have to infuse your expertise and let them know, okay, this does not go with this. Oh, but I went to my cousin's wedding and they did it. Okay, but if you want something a little different, I am not going to copy your cousin's wedding. It's going to have to be something totally different. Do you have another idea? Now, those are challenges. And then you'll have brides like we face with at times that will tell you one color, one venue, and next thing you know, within a couple of days or even a couple of hours, and I do mean hours, that will come back to you and say, oh, I don't want that. I want to change it because I don't think it's going to look good. And my maid of honor said that the last time they tried that, it wasn't good. So there you are, the challenge number one. What do? Throw up your hand in the air and walk away? No, you don't. You sit back with them. You go through the entire thing, the process, get back into the drawing board and say, okay, this is not what we're going to do, but we're going to infuse it with X, Y, Z. So now you're not only engaging in fixing the problem, but you're also now allowing them to be a part of the fixing.
Joy, you know, I can't help but remark that you smile quite easily. You have a
Yes, I do.
warming, you know, you have a warming aura about you. You relax people,
And
and you did a bachelor's, I think, in psychology. But
yes,
how
I do.
much? It seems as though interpersonal relationship is like a very important asset to have in this type of industry.
Extremely so. And when I did that way back when, I didn't even know that I would have had to use it at this level. But I gotta tell you, I use it at every day of my life. It's extremely infused. So I'm glad that I really did do that. Because I tell you, sometimes you're faced with so many little idiosyncrasies that you wonder sometimes, like Mahalia Jackson says, how did I make it over?
Here is,
Because sometimes it's not that easy, eh? But
I
at the end
understand.
of the day, because you're working with nervous people and unpredictable people, and you don't know what is really going to set the tone with them or not, but you're doing the job and you're executing it to the best of your ability. So when that time comes and everybody says, "Oh, this was so good, Miss Joy, I love it, thank you so much," and kissing everybody, the staff and everybody, it's a real good day for me. It's a good day for us.
For the young people or those who are considering getting into this industry, I'm going to ask you this question. Everybody has their trigger points, their triggers, you know, what sends you over the edge or gets you upset. Obviously, you're able to control yours and to always show a good face, and the customer comes first and so on. How do you manage that when your buttons are really pushed?
I'll tell you what I do, and it's very, very simple. And if you don't know me, you wouldn't even know it's happening. But if you know me, you will know it's very much happening. I would say to you, excuse me, I need to get some water. Because
What?
I'm really trying to temper myself.
Water.
Yes,
Wow.
I have to have a drink of water. Because there is no telling what may come out if I allow it to. Because you see, it's not everything that comes up you want it to come out. So you have to know what you're doing. Shakespeare once says, "Temperance, my child, temperance."
Yes.
So
What is?
I have to have temperance, and my breaking point is water.
Do
I
you have?
love water. Water is such a calming effect. It's a soothing effect, even though it's moisture to the throat.
Yeah,
Trust me. By the time you have a sip of water, there's so many things that you can think of that will not really surface, and that's a good thing.
that is true. What is your favorite type of wedding?
Oh my goodness. Being having an English background, as we all grew up in Guyana, British Guyana at that time, I'm pretty much into that because if you notice, my company is the Harrods of Weddings. And as you know, Harrods is housed in London.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the British style of wedding, not saying we don't do any other, because we also do Indian weddings and everything else that goes with it. But for me, that is my ideal wedding. I love tea. I love crumpets. I love sandwiches. So British style wedding, yes, I'm all over that. Quaint, elegant.
Quaint, elegant.
Hmm.
Your company, how does one find you?
Well, we're on the website. You can go to my email is my email is agnesjoy@gmail, and then my website is what is it? Joy Agnes Events.
JoyAgnesEvents.com.
Yes, .com. Because we do all types of events.
Mhm.
And I tell you what I say to people, which is not even a joke. We do from weddings to funerals because what people are doing now is actually having a repast after the funeral and they turn it into a little celebration, which I think is really nice. At that point in time, you showcase a video with the deceased and all the things they did throughout the course of their lives until their demise. So it allows family to have closure. And I think it's a wonderful idea, and we do those.
What does it mean, Joy, to be a certified Preston Bailey wedding and event designer?
Oh my God. It's a title that I really do wear with honor, and I tell you why. I don't know if you know anything of Preston Bailey. Preston is from Panama originally. He does real over the top designs. And to be able to call yourself or to be able to have that form of certification, it's very high end.
Oh, and certification by Preston, was that very important to you and to
Yes,
what
it
you're doing?
was.
Hmm.
Yes, it was very important to me because you have to be in a position not only with like minded people of yourself, but if you're going to claim that you want to soar and to be the best at what you do, you cannot be in a chicken coop. I want to be an eagle. I don't want to be a chicken hawk.
Joy, at what point along this journey in wedding planning? I know you do events and all of that, but at what point did you decide, you know what, this is it. This is what I am going to do. Because you've had other professions before.
Yes,
So
I do.
I think a nurse.
Yes, I was.
Hmm.
Yes, I was a
So
teacher.
where along the line did you decide, you know what, this is it?
After I did my first 50th birthday party and I got my first $400 check
Uh huh.
and I got my first taste of working for myself and the freedom of doing it because my kids were still in school at that point in time. And being able to know, Selwyn, that I can create visions that people would love, not like, but would love and adore. And that is when I made my turning point because the transformation of a room means and says a lot. You know, when you step into a Joy Agnes event, you know you're in a Joy Agnes event.
I like the
Because,
ring. I like the ring of your name. You know, I
okay,
love the cadence of it. Joy Agnes,
yes,
very chic.
thank you.
When you reflect on your masterpieces, what is one particular creation that stands out for you?
One particular creation for me are my ice sculptures. I love ice sculptures, and I can infuse them with pictures of whomever or little sayings of whatever. And I like that because then you have the lights around it, and it's different. I like different. I am not your cookie cutter wedding planner. I'm not your cookie cutter event planner. I like to infuse different things into what I do. So you'll never come to a Joy Agnes event, regardless if it's a wedding or a real event, and see the same thing that I did at Selwyn's place. You are not going to see it there. I don't care how much you want to pay me. That is not happening.
You know, I want to ask you this question, and then we'll take a quick break. What was the most, in all your experience, Joy? What was the most humbling experience you've had as a wedding planner?
Oh, oh my goodness. This was years ago, Selwyn. I didn't have a name and I didn't have a face. And when I say that, I'm talking publicly.
Yes.
A young lady, I know you heard of the Make a Wish Foundation.
Yes.
And she had practically, they said, 2 months to live, which she went on to have four. It went over to two more. And her mom had asked me if I can have a birthday party for her. And I was humbled and I really went out of my way to make it happen Because I tell you something, the gift of life is something that we can never, ever, ever recreate. I don't care what we try to do. And when you have that and you know consciously that this individual is making an exit, I don't know for everybody, but it puts you into a very humbling way because you want to be able to make a statement to the individual and you also wanted to have an impact on their lives, saying, this is the best birthday party I ever had. And every time it's just so many things, eh? But whenever I think about Dawn and I think of the fact of knowing she was consciously leaving, it does a few things. It's one thing if when we live this life not knowing, but it's another thing when you consciously know, when your family know, and especially your parents know, you are not going to be here that long. It makes me, as an individual, given that honor to even make it more special for you. Let that be an everlasting thought.
Let's take a break, Joy.
Will do.